Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home of the web, unnaturalshow.com. Welcome, the one, the only Suzanne Stevens to the podcast.
Hello, team. Happy to be here.
Now, there are a couple, so we're a news and politics type podcast, and Susie has decided to grace us with her presence as our senior female correspondent to talk about some of the stories that we've got going on this week that pertain to women. Thank you, Suzanne, for making this not just a podcast of three mainly white, mainly straight dudes talking about the news and introducing a female element. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be the uterus carrying member of this crew.
Well, that's why they call it a uterus and not a you to you. So this week,
around 2:30.
It got to bed around 2:30. No, Susan. Obviously, it is a joy to have you on the podcast, regardless of your gender. But I did think that when I saw some of the stories that we were looking at for this week, I thought who better than to Suzanne Stevens to give us her insightful commentary on those. So that's why you're here today. I also realized I was slightly remiss in characterizing you in one of our recent episodes. So during the Jack Heath episode, I mentioned you and how good you are at social media, and Yes, I know, which I subsequently saw on LinkedIn the other day, which was very kind of you to post that. But then I listened to the clip and I was like, oh, that was slightly disrespectful how I referred to Suzanne there as a part-time influencer. What I should have said was part-time influencer, full-time, incredible content producer at a legitimate advertising agency. So I apologize if that came across as slightly less than respectful.
I mean, you pay my mortgage better than the other, so I think you got that order pretty correct.
I was trying to praise your content and social media skills, and that obviously did not come off.
From me.
Sorry, say again.
I put it on LinkedIn. What more do you want from me?
No, you did great. You did so good.
She shared it, so I mean, it can't have been that bad.
Dude, no, but what it was is she was making a response video to a screen cap of our podcast, and I said part-time influencer, and I saw the ever slight just raise of the eyebrows there, okay. I was like, ugh, that was not the most respectful way to refer to my very talented friend. So for that, I apologize.
No worries.
Alrighty, so number one story off the block is Georgie Purcell. So this week, a Victorian MP in the state parliament, Georgie Purcell, shared a side-by-side photo comparison on the social media platform Twitter, or formerly Twitter, now X, blaming Nine News for sexist image editing. Now, they said it was part of an automation, quote unquote, that caused the change in the image. But when you look at the side-by-side images, it does look a little bit sus. So they were putting together a graphic. You've got Georgie Purcell, the source photo on one side, Georgie Purcell again in a Nine News graphic on the right-hand side. And you don't have to look too closely to see that the image of Georgie Purcell on the right-hand side does have larger breasts, and they have introduced a midriff to the dress where one did not exist before. And so they said it was the fault of an automation. And I'm not sure if there's a TIG old biddy automation out there at Adobe.
There is.
I doubt it.
Probably.
But essentially what they said is they put it through a generative AI filter. So this is a new thing.
Generative expand, I believe.
Correct.
It's where you can kind of have an image and then you want to make the image a little larger. You want to have more
of what's in there. And so it makes it up as to what's outside.
Yeah. Based on the data it currently has, it goes, okay, so I'll just... Normally you'd think I'll continue the white dress, I guess, in a way. But yeah, depending where they were cropping it from, generatively it might have assumed it was a top, but come on, guys.
Yeah, so it does kind of... I do think that it was... they've cropped it and then they've done a generative AI and that's expanded the dress to below where it was and like created an image that didn't exist. That's what generative, like the generate. What was the function called again, Tom? You named it.
Generative expand.
Generative expand. That's what that function is for, right? But what it's not supposed to do is like change the content within the image. And so like clearly some person would have had to have hit the button that says, generative expand, looked at the image that came out and then went, great, this is all good by me. And then it got pushed through to an... So like best case scenario, what Channel 9 is saying is like, we are using AI to create news and content and not checking the results before it goes to print. Like that is the best case scenario for this professional news organization full of big boys who get paid. Is the best case scenario is we don't look at the shit that we pump out to you idiots. And the worst case scenario is like, someone potentially like deliberately decided to edit this in a way that makes her look bad because patriarchy. Like,
because did we mention Adobe's response to this?
Well, Adobe's like, bro, no, that's not how fucking. That's not how Photoshop works. So the quote is, quote, any changes to this image would have required human intervention and approval. Because like, fucking, there's no tig old bitty filter. We're just like, make tits huge, please. Go on my anime manga tits on this image. That doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it shouldn't.
So best case scenario is probably unlikely given Adobe's feedback there. It is probably worse to middling case scenario.
So Susie, as someone who probably uses Photoshop in your work as like a content producer, like what's your perspective on the Photoshop like argument that Channel 9 has made?
Well, I loved how like messy bitch grenade it like Adobe made this situation.
Yes, Queen, slay him.
Like, our fault. There's like it was a program error, and then Adobe's like, excuse me. But like we work with a bunch of really talented graphic designers. We use the expand tool all the time because it does cut down time.
Sure.
But with any kind of AI feature, you need to prompt it in order for it to do something. It doesn't think on its own. So even
you've used this tool, to be clear. So you've actually had experience with this exact function that we're talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like if there's something strange in the background that you want to get rid of quickly and you don't want to have to spend, lots of time editing it out, you can use these tools. But you still are aware of what the original image looked like. And to them saying, oh, it was a little bit cropped under the bust and then we expanded it and it gave her a crop top. There were so many photos of her shot to the waist that they could have used as a reference point. So from our perspective, it's very much a user error. So like you said before, best case scenario, it was done on purpose, in my opinion. Worst case scenario, you have people being like, I can't tell the difference between this photo of a woman with a dress on and a woman who's wearing a crop top. Like you have eyes. People, how many eyeballs saw this before it got published?
So that's an interesting perspective.
Not enough, clearly.
Because our perspective when we first thought about it was, as George said, was that it's less about it's probably more harmful if there's ill intent there as opposed to carelessness. But you think the carelessness in this instance, your opinion would be that is the bigger issue because it's more of an overarching problem within the news organisation, perhaps. Is that fair to say?
Well, me, I feel like it was done on purpose. I don't, but also like, what's the logic behind that? Like, just trying to discredit this person who's trying to stop. What was it? Duck hunting.
Yeah, so we should talk about what the actual thing was. So so basically, the Victorian government passed sort of a watered down legislation where they're not banning duck hunting, but there are like hunters will face mandatory Aboriginal cultural awareness training and some tougher penalties if they do bad things with ducks. But the duck hunting itself will still continue. So obviously, Georgie's from the Animal Justice Party, and she came out obviously against it. But the funny thing is, in this whole story, the whole reason why she came out and gave that press conference and the article and made that statement has been lost. It's just become this.
Well, we don't even. The underlying story is lost and forgotten. It's really become about women and representation in media. As to whether it's deliberate or not is kind of besides the point. Like, even if it were deliberate, you should have, as a professional news organization with thousands of employees, you should have a content moderation process where things go through and like if I send shit out to a client, right? My shit doesn't get published when I write a bid or if I write a proposal. It probably goes to like one person or maybe a team of people who's going to read and approve it. The amount of proofing and checking that I do before I send a document out to a client, knowing that this is going to be the way that my potential client interacts with our brand, like you would not believe the amount of checking and rechecking and proofing and tidying up and reformatting that we go through. And this is going out to millions of people, this content. And there's what sort of approval process check it. It just feels like to me that they're just like pumping shit out, and it's like they're trying to do it at such a velocity that any kind of editorial standards have just gone out the window. That's my impression. But like either way, it's bad. Like it's not good. Like either scenario makes you, a professional news organization, look terrible.
I feel the other side of this is something that I look into a lot from the IT perspective, is that these tools also inherently, to throw Adobe under the bus a little bit, these tools inherently have a sexist bias to them as well. That like often
depending
the
on
way
the
that they're
image
designed
set.
and the data sets that they're fed on, the people who are designing them, like they sort of have done, like I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but like that they canvas across predominantly male, predominantly white guys working on developing these tools, and then what kind of stuff that they put in them. I've seen lots of instances of people being like, oh, I used the expand tool on a photo, like a woman saying a photo of myself with 3 of my male friends, and it didn't expand, and it was like, oh, I'm wearing a bikini. I was like, I wasn't. Like, here's the dress I was wearing, but it cropped sort of at the chest, and it was like like you could see her like chest line, and it was like, yeah, okay, it expanded me into a bikini. The guy is still in shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is the tickle bitty expand mode kind of inherently in the bias, I feel, of the data set that they work with to expand these images.
So there is a precedent then for this. Like, it's not something that's happened. This is the first time it's happened. You know, if
no,
one was saying the truth, this
I would imagine the midriff kind of thing did come out of a generative expand thing, but it's just fucked that no one noticed.
Yeah,
like it's insane. Or either, as we've been saying, that they didn't notice, or they did and didn't care. Both are terrible.
What were you going to say, Suze?
It doesn't explain the tits, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're cutting it from the midriff. That's the only part that we're going to expand. Fine, but how did the boobs get bigger?
Yeah, the tig old bitty button is not one I've seen in Adobe's in Adobe's setup. You're right. Like that feels like it.
Unless they started from the middle of the chest, which is like, why would you do that? Because the photo includes all that. You don't need to expand from there. If you expanded from there and it just decided to enlarge her chest.
I mean, the original photo is what we're looking at here. So the original photo is Georgie by a lake wearing a full length dress. The one they've edited, by the looks of it, it's her with Jacinta Allen behind her with an orange background with ducks flying past, and then a guy with a rifle in the back left hand corner. So they've mashed a bunch of things together.
Yeah, I haven't seen Duck Hunters much. I don't see a lot of Duck Hunters. Do they look that armed to the teeth? That guy looks like it could be
it kind of looks like it could be the same background they use for Gallipoli stories. Like that's
I know.
I think it's just like they're just like guy with a gun, orange, sunset, and
is it a bird or is it an F-18? I can't tell.
I legitimately think that could be a fighter jet in the background as opposed to a duck.
Honestly, actually, it could be now that you point that out. I hadn't clocked that, but some of those birds do look kind of fighter jetty.
So, like, what input? Like, did they say just show us ducks, or have they said like what? Yeah, what were the inputs to this? That's what I want to know. Like, what were they picking as part of their?
It's funny because what it betrays is this idea that news organizations are already using artificial intelligence in a way that's not transparent, right? Like they got caught out, and they got caught out bad this time, and they've since apologized. But like, what it says to me is that content that we're already looking at and seeing in the news is at least touched up by AI, and we're not being informed about it. So like, I know it's very subtle in this instance, but to know that like news and content and like video and images that we're getting from news organizations may not actually be visually representative of the thing that they're representing to us. I think is like a much larger conversation, a much scarier conversation as well for us to be like, because everyone knows it. Everyone's heard the term fake news and everyone's seen deep fakes of, Joe Biden saying something cooked or whatever. And they go, haha, see, he's insane. He's lost his mind. And like, actually that's a deep fake. Like that's a whole deliberate campaign to make him look crazy. Like, the idea that this is now sort of seeping down to the level of like day-to-day content where we don't know what's in front of us, if it's real or not, I think is incredibly concerning. I don't have a solution to that. I just make jokes, but
I did enjoy Georgie's little follow-up. Well, not follow-up, I guess it was included kind of in her comment, but as a bit of a mic drop as to how she can double prove that this was edited if the original photo's not enough, and that's that she has tattoos across her stomach.
Yeah, she's got I've got tats everywhere, so that's obviously not me.
So she's like, yep. I was like, yeah, that's not my midriff because it's not covered in tattoos. So,
and I like so a lot of the commentary. Someone said if someone made a male MP's junk bigger in Photoshop, it wouldn't be taken seriously. Unlike the bullshit this will stir up. Like, I don't know if I. Like, that would never happen. You know what I mean? Because, like, we don't sexualize men in the same way. Like, the idea that, like, it's just like, it's just a bit silly. Like, yeah, I don't know if I can get behind that. I do think it's emblematic of something, right? Like.
Have you seen other instances, Suze, from your content journey and obviously in your day-to-day work? Have you seen stuff like this sort of happen across the industry in advertising, or news is one thing, but in advertising as well? Is there much of an eye for that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when you're producing the same thing over and over again, if you can do it quicker, any business is going to jump on board of that. So in my studio, we've been utilizing AI since day one. It's not replacing anyone's jobs because at the end of the day, even a copywriter has to put in the correct prompts to understand your brand's message, tone of voice, things like that. In terms of using AI solely to generate content on itself, by itself, no, it's just used as something to speed it up. Like, it's treated the same as like spell check is used in emails. There's still a lot of a human touch to it. In terms of like errors that are being produced by AI and then getting out to the public, no, because, I deal in silly little marketing that's basically mainly for social media. There's lots of people with proper grown-up jobs in my studio, but I consider myself very much a personality harder. There's so many eyeballs that sees a silly little video that's going to go on TikTok before any member of the audience. So if there is an issue or something like that that's been put across, it's usually caught up in the first round of edit. So that's like what John said before, where how many people these online platforms have edited, surely. So how did this get through without human intervention?
I think what it speaks to is like an impoverishment of the journalistic apparatus. The idea that they've just become content mills, essentially, where it's like, let's slap together content as quickly as we can, pump it out. I've got 50 stories to punch out before I leave at the end of the day. It's because of how skeletal the editorial staff at news organizations has become, right? Like,
they've been outsourcing and laying off people in like the editorial sub-editorial process for forever now. So
do you think as well the fact that
element too,
because newspapers, for instance, or even if you're a television studio, you'd have your nightly broadcast, right? You'd have your 6 o'clock news, and you've got the whole day to prep that. And if you're a newspaper, you would have presumably
up until midnight,
before to prepare, edit, and then lay out your content. And obviously, things go in at the last minute. Like, I'm sure when 9/11 happened, for instance, everyone was like rearranging their stuff at the last minute. But my point being is there was a much more systematic process back in the day, whereas now, because everything's online, everything has to be instant, and you have to be first.
It's about pushing it out as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that concept is.
Well, think about Paul Barry.
For it,
what would Paul Barry at Media Watch do all day if all these organizations had editorial standards? What would he do all day? He'd be bored.
Find other ways to grind his axe against trans people, but let's not have that discussion.
Oh, does he really?
Yep, I'll send you some links.
All right, well, we'll take that offline.
Oh no.
So speaking of online and AI images, in fact, there was a story that was trending this week where X, formerly known as Twitter, had Taylor Swift AI was a trending topic. And in case you're wondering, was not for good-hearted reasons.
Yep.
It was for bad sex reasons. So essentially, sexually explicit AI generated images of Taylor Swift were circulating, some getting in the tens of millions of views, and are up for 17 hours prior to their removal. More than 45 million views, 24,000 reposts, hundreds of thousands of likes and bookmarks. Before the verified user who shared the images on their account was suspended for violating platform policy.
They even went as far, I think, on X specifically, to you could not actually search Taylor Swift. If you searched Taylor Swift in the app, it would come back with no results. They just nuked her SEO essentially.
Yeah, I suppose what else can you do? You just, when you're considering that, Twitter,
how fast this shit moves.
It moves fast, but 17 hours is a long time. I think they just needed to shut it down. And considering how Elon Musk has hollowed out the sort of content moderation teams,
good
over at Twitter, that's hardly surprising. I mean,
that's what we need less of in a massive major social media organization. Less content moderators.
But also, who's? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I get, there's a lot of AI pornography out there at the moment, but the thing that I find weird,
senior AI pornography expert Adam Doreen.
But what I don't understand is that it's shared. A lot of stuff shared on Twitter. So this is on Twitter. There are sexually explicit images, and then people. I'm assuming. They'll be assuming there's some bots there. There's got to be some bots pushing that shit out. But then there are also people just going, "Oh, great, share."
Wow.
On a public profile.
Yeah. Susie, I don't know. Have you ever had Twitter in your social media sort of lexicon?
Well, I think 15 years ago when it was shiny and new, and then the bad people came, and I muted myself off that platform very quickly.
Yeah.
I've always been a more visual medium, so having to be smart, witty, and beautiful was just I had to get rid of 2 out of the 3 to make that work. In my home.
I'm very much more just absorbing gremlin of Twitter. I don't post very much, but I read a lot of stuff. But anyway, my point was going to be spot the person who has clearly never had a Twitter account, because Adam being I don't understand. People on Twitter just publicly and share porn. I'm
yeah,
man.
The internet's wild. It's
Why have you been?
You've got your family members following you and stuff, or people that you work with, and then you're oh yeah, here's some Taylor Swift.
People don't get horny on Maine, Adam. That's why RFK accidentally RFK Jr. recently liked the 19-year-old's butt on Instagram. It's because he was accidentally horny on Maine. He had his sub account that he does all the horny stuff on. He has his regular account that he does running for president tweets on, and he accidentally got him mixed up and liked the Brazilian girl with the big butt. These things happen. People get horny on Maine by accident.
Yeah, Adam, they're not full of accounts that are all called Adam Doreen. They're all called fucking fart dealer 420 or whatever, and just a complete anonymity.
Yeah,
and they're all them tick old biddies. That's how it works.
So you can't link the account back to whoever it is. I guess the other thing.
Sorry, Suze, I missed that. Sorry, what'd you say?
So you mean the second account for Adam wouldn't be Adam Doreen loves big tits 456? For
example.
Okay, well, there you go. So now I've learned some things about Twitter, but
compared to other social media networks, Twitter has been oddly permissive about porn, and so there are adult entertainers and things like that on there that people will follow, and they'll post explicit clips and stuff on Twitter, and that's allowed under their terms of use. So what's not allowed is creating artificially
what they've said
intelligence.
now, at least. I don't know if that was
Say again?
in place beforehand. I don't know if that, I guess from this story of the Taylor Swift content recently being like shared everywhere, that Twitter has I keep using X and Twitter interchangeably, but fuck it, it's Twitter. X is a dumb name. They've posted out that they have like they have a term of not posting non-consensual nudity content. Essentially a revenge porn clause. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I don't know if that is in response to this or if they've always had that.
No. My understanding is that was pre-existing. Like you're not like because otherwise, I mean, what the fuck?
If they didn't have one, if they didn't have one previously, Jesus fucking Christ, you guys!
Someone's telling us about revenge porn stuff. That's no good.
Taylor Swift can't win though, can she? I mean, she's got whether it's guys. I'm assuming guys, could be girls as well, frothing over her and doing weird stuff with AI images. You've got that aspect to it. And then you've got like all the Swiftie fans who are like, it's like a cult. And then you've got like everyone who hates her, which is like the rest of the internet. And I don't understand why she is so divisive.
I don't understand why people hate Taylor Swift so much. She seems like a nice lady. Like, can everyone just... I remember reading this article maybe 6 years ago. And it was something to the effect of like, do you hate Taylor Swift or do you actually like know nothing about her at all? And I was like, I read the article. I was like, I realized I don't know anything about her at all. I've just understood from the media that I'm supposed to hate Taylor Swift because of all the articles where like, oh, she's difficult and she has lots of boyfriends and like, she constantly like breaks up with someone and then writes a love song about them like, we all hate Taylor Swift. And I was like, oh yeah, I was like, that's not actually an opinion I came up with. I just like drank that.
You absorbed it.
I absorbed it wholesale from, some media outlet because I understood that it's like, oh yeah, we're not supposed to like Taylor Swift. I was like, what do I actually know about Taylor Swift? It's like nothing really. Like,
very the most successful woman on the planet, basically. Like,
I think a lot of it is
in media. I think they called it the Jennifer Lawrence effect, where you'll see someone who rises to fame and becomes really successful in their field and is so super relatable and everyone likes them. And then all of a sudden it's like a switch goes off and the media completely changes their opinion on them and they just get hammered so hard. It happened to Jennifer Lawrence and she had to disappear for a really long time. She only just started acting again. Same thing happened with, who else was it? Anne Hathaway. After she won Oscar, again, oversaturated, and then she became sexual because her Oscars just had unfortunate pleating across her bust. And again, she had to take a massive break from acting because she was just getting absolutely railed on the internet. So this is an ongoing thing. Taylor Swift has managed to avoid it for so long because she's had a huge fan base. But it's to the stage where you're seeing them so often and then someone in the media is just like, let's get else on it.
It's interesting though.
It's reaching that scale as well. Like I guess when you reach a level of notoriety and celebrity, then you're almost automatically going to become divisive in that the sheer number of people who are aware of who you are. Everyone, like aware. Someone's going to not like you for something. So, and then that becomes the arguments, right?
So I was listening to this interview with Molly Ringwald on the podcast Search Engine. So Molly Ringwald from Breakfast Club fame and 16 Candles and other movies that people would know her from. Big actress in the 80s and 90s. Basically, she was describing her experience as the same sort of thing. She goes, I knew that I was getting so famous that a backlash would come. And that's exactly what happened. And she basically like fucked off to France for a couple of years because she's just like, I'm just going to yeet out of here because it's actually getting all too much. So it's not as though it's just the internet and social media that's sort of facilitated this. This is like a thing that we as a society do to women when they get too big for their boots. And we decide, tall poppy syndrome, they get too big, we're going to cut them down. Like this is an ongoing thing over decades, right?
The internet, it was the magazines, right? Like,
it was the tabloids.
Diana and God knows what else, just what are those magazines called? Like Women's
tabloids,
Weekly.
Us Weekly and
TV Week. No, it's different. I don't know. I don't read magazines. You can tell. I'm not on Twitter. I don't read magazines, but I do walk past them, or remember walking past them, particularly back when I was a bit younger and they were more prolific.
At the shops.
Yeah. What the fuck are the shops? Right next to the checkout. What the fuck are these headlines? Pictures of like Leonardo DiCaprio like walking around with a tubby belly, and they're like, Leo is let loose, and it's like, calm down.
Oh no, Brad Pitt's at it again, and then like Jennifer Aniston like wanting to kill Angelina Jolie or whatever. It's like,
yeah, that's right.
Leave these fucking people alone. Honestly, what's wrong with you?
I don't know, but it's the AI generating stuff is an extra element to this. That's just like,
well, like
wild,
because people were creating their own kind of like deep fakes before like internet. Whenever there's celebrities. Like if you Google those celebrities and go like deep into the see these sort of search results, you'll see people that have like photoshopped this person's face onto like a porn star actress's face. Like that's existed for a long time. The problem with AI is that it takes that to a whole nother level of realism. It's not just like someone who's taped a mask of someone's face onto another face like Hannibal Lecter, like they used, they used to look. In the 90s and the 2000s, now it's like it's photorealistic. Like it looks like you look at this person and you go, this could legitimately be Taylor Swift.
It removes, for lack of a better term, the skill requied to create such an image. Like if you were doing these sorts of things.
Skills in big air quotes there. Skills.
Perhaps it removes the obstacle of like, I have to actually want to do this.
Get good at Photoshop.
You don't have to have the Photoshop graphic design skill, image manipulation skills in order to create such a realistic image with pre-generative AI.
As a pervert back in the day, you had to develop some skills, okay? You couldn't just go around, just type into an AI, you had to earn it back in the day. You had to learn what masking was, feathering, the interplay between light and darkness. All of a sudden, now you're a French filmmaker because you, like all of a sudden you become an auteur because you've figured out, you've built a skill set based on your deviance.
I mean, funny story and a bit of a tangent from this. I don't know if you guys are aware of Source Filmmaker, which was a program that was so the Source is a graphics engine created by the company Valve, who made Half-Life and Portal, Counter-Strike, all that sort of stuff. And they released a thing called Source Filmmaker, which was an idea of getting their graphics rendering engine and giving it sort of film editing tools in it so people could use their game assets to make short films. Like, what was it called? Machinima was like a kind of thing where like people would just make short film sketches using assets from video games. Like Red versus Blue is probably the most famous one, using Halo assets and stuff like that. Anyway, the reason I bring this up in this context is that the video game in 2013, BioShock Infinite. One of the protagonists, Elizabeth, who's the woman you're
rescuing. People are really horny for Elizabeth.
Correct. To the point where, like, in order to like use her character model in these like Source Filmmaker style like pornographic videos, people pioneered rendering techniques to make better porn of this character in this 3D animating. That's my point. Like you needed dem skills before this. Like people became better 3D animators.
If you think about it, isn't that really the story of all of male ingenuity, is to find ways to capture
a better way to look at boobs?
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, you look at the camera, the first thing that people did with the camera when it was developed in the late 1800s was like, guys, let's capture some titties. Like it's the first. They're like, should we do landscapes or maybe like the present? They're like, no. Let's look at two chicks doing it. Like that was the first thing that men, when they invented the ability to capture images, the first thing that occurred to them.
I don't know if it was the
sex.
first thing.
It's pretty close.
Was it the first? It was one of the.
It was
couple
up there.
Of things.
They're like, look at the birds of nature. How good's Teddy Roosevelt's speech? Also, here is my entire sorted library of erotica that I've captured using this camera. Like, if there's a technology that exists, it will be used to facilitate sex because men are trash.
100%. But I suppose a potential silver lining out of all this is that if anyone can get regulation action on AI generative stuff, it's fucking Taylor Swift.
You don't fuck with the Swifties.
Yeah.
They were flooding the hashtag of Taylor Swift AI with just like other random shit to drown out. Imagine that is a like level of fan base that like I can only imagine like the dedication where someone woke up, they looked at their phone, they go, Susan, cancel my 9 o'clock. I need to tweet for Taylor. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, it's like how what's the K-pop band BTS?
Yeah,
like BTS fans fucking swayed an election.
Yeah,
like kind of thing. Oh, yeah, it was great. But yeah, so actually, in the past week, a bill has been tabled into like the U.S. House. Called the Disrupt Explicit Forged Images and Non-Consensual Edits Act, or Defiance.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the acronym? Someone really wants it to spell shield.
They really wanted to spell Defiance. I reckon so too.
Because all the Republicans, they would be very against this. You've got to assume all the Christian good boy.
Well, I mean, yes, but also, so I guess the difference in here, right? Because I think there is, obviously there's laws around revenge pornography and, sexual harassment, all this sort of stuff, right? But I think the main difference from this bill would be allowing victims to be able to sue the people who create these deepfakes.
Good, do it.
So I guess it's, being tabled so that Taylor can sue that account that started all this, right? So, and it's like, good. That sense, like it's crazy that you can't already. And if anyone's got the influence to make such a thing kind of get some traction, it's Taylor Swift. So it's fucking awful what's happened to it. But the benefit of it might be that someone will actually fucking do something about it.
The Conservatives are not generally fans of Taylor Swift. Apparently there's been a whole conspiracy theory going around at the moment about her. The Christian right thinks that her and her boyfriend, who's the footballer, remind me of his name, Travis Kelce, who is on the Kansas City Chiefs, that the NFL is like pre-scripted and the whole thing is to like been scripted and pre-arranged to get the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl in order to get Taylor Swift to like come out at the end of the Super Bowl and endorse Joe Biden. Like the whole thing is a big like prearranged fever dream conspiracy theory. And I'm like until I said endorse Joe Biden. Yeah. It's like it's not wrestling. Like they go out there and they play the football game. Like I'm sure matches have been fixed or whatever, but it's like, you can't script a whole season of sport things. Like that's insane. But
George, they have their whistles, they have their costumes, they're the director. Of course it's all scripted.
Yeah. I mean, some would call them uniforms, not costumes, Suzanne, but that's they've got their stage directions. It's like, no, that's called, doing movements, blocking for
That's a play. That is a play in American football.
But so the Christians are not fans of Taylor Swift, even though they should be. Like you look at her and it's like this, blonde, white couple. It's the footballer and the cheerleader. You think that's like this exemplifies everything that like gets white Christians in America like completely rock hard. But they're like, no, she's obviously in league with Joe Biden, which is not surprising because like she did endorse Joe Biden last time around. So I don't know why it would be like some big reveal that she's.
Let me get the cognitive dissonance here. They would much rather rail against Taylor Swift for an alleged Joe Biden endorsement instead of potentially, I mean, I'm not saying all Republicans, I don't know exactly which Republicans may vote for this or not, but the Republican establishment may be more inclined to do that, to like F Taylor Swift than stopping sexual exploitation images on the internet, which is against pretty much any of their
What I'm saying is they don't like Taylor Swift. So it's not like, yes, she has a lot of sway, but I don't think there's like a whole section of the populace that was like, well, she started country and now she's not country. She's one of them. She's a liberal coastal elite now. Like, so I don't think they're going to do any favors for Taylor Swift, but we'll see. I love and appreciate the way that Adam tries to put himself in the brain space of far-right conspiracy theorists to try. You can see him, you can see the gears turning to like, he's trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it literally like doesn't compute with his fucking brain. It's like his brain is breaking.
Man.
It's like I've told him to like, what is the answer to everything? And then Adam's brain is just like, does not compute.
Oh, fucking hell.
It's bad.
Speaking of not computing, there's been a bit of a backflip, shall we say, this week with regards, came back to Australia, with regards to the stage 3 tax cuts. Turns out they're probably pretty good.
Turns out if you give everyone a tax cut, people are actually pretty fond of that idea overwhelmingly. And so now the media narrative this week has gone from the broken promises narrative to amplifying voices saying like, yeah, this is a good idea. And then the news organization's like, yeah, we're with you guys. We think it's a great idea also. It's like, where were you last week, guys? There was a lot of chat about broken promises last week.
Not to mention as well, Peter Dutton's tipped to support, the Liberals are now tipped to support those tax cuts.
Yeah, of course, because he doesn't believe in anything. The man runs on pure animus like E10 ethanol fuel. Like it felt like racial and like what, just pure hate and animus feeds Peter Dutton. It's what he consumes for his fuel.
Not just Peter Dutton, but the whole Liberal, they had a Liberal Party meeting to discuss it. And allegedly most Liberals were like, if you go against this,
yeah, we will never win a government again. If you oppose a tax. So for those who don't know, the stage 3 tax cuts were going to be a big handout to a bunch of people making over $150,000 who could absolutely afford not to have a big tax cut. And what they've done is they've taken that tax cut and they've spread it out. So if you're earning less than $150,000 a year, you're better off. You get a bit of a tax cut. And those earning over $150,000 still get a tax cut, just less of a big tax cut. Right? And so it's pretty clever from a policy positioning politics standpoint, because it's like, well, if you're giving most people a tax cut, most people are going to be in favor of that. And anyone opposing that you're going to get wedged, right? That's what a wedge is it keeps everyone on your side together and it keeps everyone on the other side separated and annoyed. And so like from that perspective, it was a perfect piece of politics. They didn't scrap the stage 3 tax cuts like everyone was expecting. They didn't get rid of them. They said, we're going to change them. We're still keeping them. So it's not a broken promise, but we're going to distribute it so it's more fair and more people get a piece of the pie. And it also wedges the Liberal Party. So it's like a perfect piece of politics there. And so now Dutton is in the unenviable position of admitting that he has no core beliefs whatsoever and is just like absolutely willing to do and support whatever it takes to become prime minister. It's like it just shows how hollow of a person he is.
It wasn't just him. It's all the key front benches. Like it was interesting watching Susan Ley, like in an interview, try to do the mental gymnastics of like, oh well, we haven't seen the legislation yet, so we don't know whether we will support it. But like, it's bad that the government's you can't trust anything the government says, but we may end up like without saying they were going to support it, she had to sort of say, we're probably going to support it. Now, to be clear, they haven't announced their position. They're going to finalise their position, I think, just before the first sitting week of the year, which is coming up soon. But from what's been backgrounded to the press...
this feels like they haven't said they're going to support the not killing all the puppies policy, but... I think we can probably guess where they're going to land.
Boy, do I hate this policy that I'm definitely about to vote for. Anyway, so speaking of the National Press Club this week, Richard Dennis encapsulated the argument in a pretty good way to do with breaking promises. So here he is.
And the Reserve Bank governor said that he didn't expect to increase interest rates until 2024. You know what? He did 13 times. And everyone's mortgages went up while they were waiting for the tax cuts and people's rents went up. Promises are contextual. I don't think Labor should have gone to the last election promising to support the stage 3 tax cuts because they were a bad idea. But even if they'd promised to do them and I thought they were a good idea at the time, even if I'd have supported them at the time, and then interest rates went up 13 times and energy prices went up and real wages fell, and they turned around and said, I think we should break our promise, I'd still be sitting here today saying, good call. That's what grown-ups do.
Yeah, that's what grown-ups do.
Oh, cutting. Love it.
But like legitimately, I don't understand the fury that gets, but we talked about this last week on the show, the whole idea of broken promises and getting so mad, incandescent with rage about the broken promises. What will we do? The broken promises. It's like, well, politicians break promises all the time. Like, we talked about it last week. The Morrison government broke plenty of promises, like establishing an ICAC and not being a bunch of corrupt fuckheads, not stealing ministries from one another. Like, there's lots of broken promises, but it doesn't get reported out in the same breathless way that this does whenever Labor changes something, especially when it's to do with someone's money. They go, aha, see, we knew they were a bunch of pinko lefty communists. You can't fucking trust them with your money. And it's been a line that the Liberal Party and the mainstream media, mainly led by Rupert Murdoch, have been pushing for the last 20, 30 years, is that you can't trust Labor. You can't trust Labor. They're going to tax you. They're going to say they're not going to tax you, and then they are going to tax you more. And it feeds into this whole narrative, this established sort of thought pattern that we have over time that we've built up about the Labor Party. But it's like Richard Dennis said, even if, I supported those things at the time, things have changed. It's no longer a good idea. Like the idea that the world and democracy is just static and you're going to have to keep doing a bad thing just because you said you were going to do it, even if a meteorite hits the world and all of a sudden everyone's got to put money into helping people survive and deal with the fallout of the meteorite. And you go, no, we still got to do the stage 3 tax cuts. I know aliens landed and the economy's gone to shit, but we did say we were going to do the states, so we're going to do the states. We did promise.
You can't break a promise. Suze, what's your opinion? Have you been following the story, and are you looking forward to a little extra bit of money in your bank account?
Tax cut? I mean, who does not look forward to that? Considering the majority of my news comes from you three.
Oh boy.
Uh-oh.
I worry about that because we're going to see Susie storm in the Bastille one day. She's going to be eating the rich one day. It's going to be our fault.
Absolutely. I think that's the reason why I got most of the news from you guys is I had to tune out because it becomes so polluted in what is the correct agenda before, so that the actual message that needs to be communicated isn't getting across. So the whole thing's ridiculous. But we predicted this. You guys said last week, they're going to complain about it this week. People are going to start thinking for themselves and understanding the ramifications of this particular thing and then go, oh, yeah, wait, hang on. But I get money.
But I get $1,000. Fucking great. I love $1,000. Can I have more? Yeah.
The same thing happened at university, when they gave, what was it? This was like 15 years ago.
Stimulus package.
The stimulus package.
Yeah. And everyone, this is ridiculous. And all of a sudden, I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I went, well, you've got my vote because you've just given me money.
Yeah.
I know we shouldn't be able to buy them, but it worked.
But the thing with that the argument at the time, so the Kevin Rudd stimulus package, this was during the global financial crisis, I guess in 2008, 2009, the Kevin Rudd government at the time gave $1,000 to go and stimulate the economy to get people buying stuff. And then the conservative commentators at the time were like, people are going out and buying flat screen TVs. It's fucking bullshit. It's a waste of money. It's like, do you understand what stimulating the economy is? If you give people $1,000 and they go and spend it, and then they spend it at stores, and then those stores have money, you're describing stimulating the economy. They're like, can't believe they didn't save the money. It's like, well, saving the money doesn't benefit anyone. It's like, what? It's not stimulating the economy. They're like, can you believe they were irresponsible and spent the money that we gave them to spend? It's fucking ridiculous. It really does seem as though I don't feel like we're, that we've got any powers of precognition and I feel like we operate enough on first principles to be like, if you give people money, voters are going to be stoked that you give them money, especially when they need money during the cost of living crisis. If the Liberal Party was thinking one step ahead, they wouldn't have gone on this breaking promises, anti-Labor crusade, because they know it's only going to flip it and reverse it back on themselves when they turn around and vote for the fucking thing anyway. Think one step ahead. It's going to be popular, and you're going to go, what? And then what? At no point during a single party meeting at the Liberal Party headquarters did someone go, and then never happened.
I don't know whether I mean, he's a nationalist man, but I don't know whether Angus Taylor really thought that far ahead, George. I don't know if he thinks that far ahead about anything.
It does presuppose that Angus Taylor is capable of cognitive, rational thought in the first place. Well done, well done, Angus. Good job.
Good job. I mean, the thing that a lot of Australian governments haven't done is they haven't got the check printed with Donald Trump's face or whatever it was.
Donald Trump's signature.
Signature. Yeah. Like that's what happened in the US.
Face would have been a power move.
that would have been next level. Speaking of power moves, a Hong Kong court has ordered China's biggest property developer, Evergrande, I'm saying Evergrande, to liquidate. Yeah.
I'm going like Ariana Grande.
That's what I've always said. But it sounds stupid, but it must be Evergrande, right? Evergrande.
Grande's a word.
Yeah, like a grande latte.
Yeah, like so. That's the actual pronunciation of the word.
I don't know. It's a Chinese company, so I'm not sure sort of whether they're using anyway, whatever. Evergrande has been ordered to liquidate its assets after it was unable to reach a restructuring deal with creditors over hundreds of billions of dollars it owes. And speaking
a lot of scratch.
Speaking of foresight, I mean, I don't want to say that we called this.
Yeah, well, this doesn't lend to the argument that we're not precogs, but I want to say I did post the timestamp in the chat. I have to find it. But 2021 at some point, when rumblings of this first happened, we looked at it. We're like, well, yeah, that company's going to go out of business, right? Like that. It's sooner or later. It was in 17th of October 2021 that we were like, yeah, it's going to go under. And then the story kind of kept popping up a little bit every now and then. We're like, Evergrande's definitely in real trouble. Watch the space. And we're like, we're watching. They're like, man, this Evergrande company, something's real bad's going to happen. We go, okay, I'm looking. I'm keeping an eye out.
And they defaulted on their debt.
Yeah.
Like they missed their payment deadlines. And I was like, well, what's going to happen now? And then a year later, so it's been another year, and now they've been ordered to liquidate.
Ah, right. You got us.
You got us.
You got us.
So I don't know whether we're necessarily prophets, but I'll take that because we just literally take articles we see in the news and then we give our opinions about them. But that's to say, guys, if you want to know how our process, we read the news and then we give you opinions on that news.
I think calling it a process is generous. It's more like shouting into the void. The void being each other's ear holes, and then we decide to record it once a week.
Based on the Netflix cult documentaries that I've watched, I mean, that's the basis for a cult. Like, the cults have been based on less, especially in the 21st century, in the Zoom era. You know, the twin flame stuff, like, that's all, you know, you don't even need a real basis. You could just, like, get online and tell people to change genders. Like, that's apparently a thing that you can do online with the basis of nothing. So, yeah, profits, sure, why not?
So why is this an important thing? Why do we care about Evergrande? So they owe $300 billion US, billion with the B, to various creditors. They are the largest property developer in China. When we say property developer, they're not just doing houses, they're doing massive apartment buildings, they're doing shopping centers, they're doing theme parks.
They're involved with like electric vehicles and stuff as well. Like it's a huge conglomerate.
Fingers in every single pot. And now, so now that they're folding, you've got basically a bunch of investments with, you know, local Chinese investors that are now kaput. So a bunch of Chinese citizens have now lost their money. And it basically, because this has happened, and there are a number of other large companies in China that also owe a shitload of money that are in the property sector, it will send shockwaves down the line, and you will start to find whether or not this is the first move in the collapse, or maybe the second move, if you want to call it that, in the collapse of the Chinese property sector. Certainly, the collapse of the Chinese property bubble. Whether or not there will be other firms that will now go under. I'm not sure, but either way, there is a lot of people that have lost a lot of money in this, and I don't know necessarily how much they will recoup through the liquidation process. I don't expect 300 billion worth.
So in the order of like who gets paid back in terms of
asset sales.
So it generally starts with like there's a whole flow chart of like who gets paid back in what order in a bankruptcy. Like shareholders, they get whatever's left over. But like, you know, people who loan money,
creditors,
like those sorts of creditors get paid back first. But corporate creditors and like government creditors, they always go to the front of the line. Like when we say creditors, and it's like, I'm a person who bought an apartment from Evergrande that's not been built. That person is likely to, you're at the bottom of the bottom. Like you are very unlikely to get any fucking money back. And it's really unfortunate because in China, property is the way of investing, holding, and growing wealth because they have limited access to stocks and bonds and other kinds of like international stocks and things like that in China. There are very few ways to really like expand your wealth. And so housing has become, which part of what fueled this huge bubble in the first place. If you want to make money, you got to put it in housing, right? That's always been the philosophy. So,
where have I heard that before?
Yeah, I know, right? It's great. Number go up. It's great. It's always good. I bet there are no downsides to number go up. Always number go up is great. So that's the chief way of generating wealth in China. And if that pops and all these people are left holding the bag, having bought a home that they now no longer get, like you can see how that's going to have massive ripples through the economy. Now, when Bear Stearns and, you know, when the 2008 financial collapse happened, it didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like a big obvious thing. It took months for that story to really sort of play out.
Yeah.
And so I think people are going like, oh, you know, it's too big to fail. Like the government will step in. Like surely everything will be fine. It's like, no, this is how it starts. Like this is the first domino to fall over. And this is going to be like a story we're talking about for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, I think, based on this collapse. Because ironically, China as a communist state doesn't seem to be too keen to jump in there and bail them out. Unlike the Americans, who are just like directing money machine go at the banks anytime something goes wrong. They just fire hoses of cash to put out the problems. And in China, the communist lefty pinko China, they're just like, well, better luck next time. You know.
So to be clear as well, this is a Hong Kong court which has made this decision. So, I mean, while now Hong Kong is technically part of China,
that's a whole discussion.
There is a question about whether or not the people that have put money in and have had that ticked through Hong Kong, necessarily whether that will apply to the rest of all the assets in mainland China. And that may take, as you said, several years to sort of sort through. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely another step down the road. And it basically, the main thing with this is that it just affects confidence. People aren't just going to lend money now. Because back in the day, people would just give these companies money. They'd be like, oh, it's, you know, like, so it's a sure thing, as George said, safe as houses. But now I guess creditor confidence is at an all-time low for these kind of developers. So, you know, and it'll affect, for instance, Chinese money that might be coming to Australia. Like you'll see that probably start to dry up for various developments. And other overseas investment as well. And then obviously if the Chinese economy ends up spending less, if the Chinese economy sort of contracts, that affects everyone globally.
Yeah.
You know,
it affects demand and supply chains all over the world. So yeah, it'll absolutely have an effect on the global economy. The thing is, it's like when a company gets in so much trouble like this, and they have so much debt and so many obligations to people, it's a vicious cycle. It becomes really hard to get out of it because if you're a bad bet and no one in the corporate debt markets will loan you money, you have no way to get access to capital to help fuel growth and actually like change the situation for yourself. So it becomes a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like the worse things go for you, the worse things get. And yeah, it really does seem like an organization that's too big to fail. And yet the government seems to be happy to allow it to fail. Right. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Suze, how do you feel about us being one more step along the road to inevitable doom?
I just like, in this kind of circumstances, I remember reading this article, and I recently purchased my first property, which I live in.
Congratulations.
And thank you. But the whole process was utterly terrifying and very stressful. And I can't help but think about the people who went through all of this, giving them a deposit for a home that's never going to be built. Like, I remember when we were getting a deposit together, we literally gave them all the money in full.
Yeah, that's everything. This is all the money, like.
Yeah. Everyone keeps about the business and it's like, oh, it's going to fail and all these things. And like, people have lost their entire life savings, and it's going to help them.
They talk a lot about moral hazard when it comes to bailouts. The moral hazard meaning that, like, so say for example, a lot of people during the 2008 financial crisis said, why don't, I remember Jon Stewart making this argument on The Daily Show to like Jamie Dimon or some banking wanker cunt. And like, you had him on the show. It was like,
official title.
Why don't you, yes, chief cunt officer. Why don't you just give money to the people whose loans have defaulted and like just bail them out directly? Like, why go through this whole manufactured system of like propping up the banks, and then through the banks, the money, you'll have liquid banks, and then people will be able to access capital through the banks. Like, why not just skip all that and just bail people out directly? And the argument that came back was, oh, it's about moral hazard. If people know that there's no consequences to their actions, then they'll borrow and spend recklessly, knowing that the government's going to bail them out. I'm like, but isn't that what you just did for the banks? Like, isn't that...
Yeah, the banks are literally doing that then.
Aren't you then creating that exact same permission structure for the people who caused this crisis? Like, it makes no sense to me, because the people at the end user, like Susie said, is just someone who's trying to buy a house. Yeah. Like, what they're meant to be researching the liquidity of their property developer and making sure that they've got enough money to meet their short-term and long-term debt obligations before they decide to build a house. No, it's like you give someone money to build your house gets built. That really should be as simple as it is. Like, and yet all these people, the end users, are going to get stooged, and what happens? Nobody goes to jail. Nothing happens.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to tell as well. So I watched I was on a news report a couple of months ago about the Chinese economy, and what they've noted is that a lot of the key, so when you look at like a Western economy, there are lots of reports and numbers that come out, and they're all sort of pretty much the same for lots of countries. Each country
GDP, employment numbers, all that sort of stuff.
All those sort of things will come out, and they're all very transparent, and you can sort of use that as an economist to paint a picture of what may or may not be happening. The problems with China is, one, the way they're doing those numbers keeps changing. And secondly, some data sets aren't even being published anymore, which is, I guess, part of the issue with them being a communist state, is that they're able to do that, right? So in terms of what we actually know about, like, the understanding we have of the Chinese economy isn't as good as it was, say, 10 years ago. It's become... And so when situations like this happen, it's hard to tell exactly what the ramifications will be and how long it may take, because we don't necessarily know what some of the underlying issues are.
You don't know what the real numbers are, and you also don't know, even if you did have the transparency on the numbers, is the Chinese government even telling the truth? Are these even real numbers? Because I remember leading up to the pandemic, there was all this talk about, we were aiming for 7% growth and we only got 6.9 something percent or whatever. It was just like, yeah, can we believe any of that though? If you're setting these goals for yourself and you always keep meeting them, perfectly, it's like the Vladimir Putin thing of like, oh, I won 92% of the vote. It's like, well, according to you, like, but like, who else has something to say about it? Like, that's the problem with the one-party system, is you don't get any kind of transparency like that, which is fine if it's the Hermit Kingdom, if it's North Korea, who doesn't really have any real contact with the world economy at large. But when it's China, when it's, some say, the largest economy in the world, depending on who you ask, or the second largest, it kind of makes a difference. Like, it'll make a lot of difference to our wine exports and our wheat exports and our live cattle exports and our, like, all of the coal and steel and aluminum that comes out of Australia and goes to those houses to get built. Like our economy will undoubtedly be in the toilet if the building sector in China goes down. So,
well, maybe not the toilet, but it'll be definitely worse off.
It'll be not good. It'll be really not good.
Commensurate. And the thing is, a lot of these, like, going back to the stage 3 tax cuts, a lot of the way that we're funding this is through like revenue from exports of base commodities, which help fuel China's expansion. So, we fucking sold a shitload of gas. We sold a shitload of iron ore. We sold a shitload of coal.
Yeah, but if they're not building stuff, if they don't need steel for buildings, well, what are they using all that coal for? You know what I mean? Like,
but like we're expecting, the government's going, that's going to keep growing up and to the right for
number go up, number go up forever.
So we can afford to give people all these tax cuts, now, but as the guy from the Australian Institute said, it's contextual. It could change in a couple of years. Who knows?
We'll legalise marijuana until we get the money from.
You know what? Not the worst idea. Like, it would fix a lot of budget holes.
I've got not a crazy story, but just a little anecdote. Last night I was just watching Masters of the Air.
Punching cones?
And no. I don't know if you know anything about me, Tom, but I don't punch cones. But I was looking at Facebook.
You just punched George when you're drunk on your birthday.
That was many years ago, and I apologize for that. And it was
that was one time, and it was hilarious.
It was twice in the same night. I would like to clarify.
Was a slap. It wasn't a punch. But I am deeply sorry about that. But I was just on Facebook, and then I got a notification, and I was like, friend request. I was like, okay, cool. And I was expecting it to be one of these, like Insta Thoughts, sort of like, AI porn account things.
Hello, I'm Esmeralda, looking for horny man. Where you are? Are you horny man?
And it wasn't that. It was a guy, it was some dude, and he was like a picture of like
bags of pills?
A marijuana spliff.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
And he's like, I've
got
all
so
this.
Cute that you called it a marijuana spliff. That's just, if you needed evidence that Adam has never done drugs in his entire life, a jazz cigarette.
Yeah,
a jazz cigarette. But then there was like, his description was like, I've got all the stuff. All good, bro. And then I was like, okay, so you're just your weed business is just reaching out to males on the internet and asking for friend requests.
I mean, look, as far as lead generation goes, not bad.
Yeah, I used to get those from people. Yeah, I got those from people who's just like riddled with photos of just bags of various pills. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Why don't I get the pills pics?
I don't know, man.
I'm a bit disappointed now. On that note,
right. You'll just have to make do with the litany of thirst traps.
Yeah, and litany is the word. On that note, we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and motherflipping TikTok. And remember to rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. If you see a little thing to sorry, Polyverse, you didn't make it, mate. Sorry, buddy. But you can catch us after the fact on the podcast, so unnaturalshow.com, in order to get that perfect plug placement there. If you find a pod catcher of some description, put 5 stars in there. Or a thumbs up or a star or a big okay face or whatever it is they're doing nowadays.
Especially for this, I'm on it.
Exactly right.
Hey.
We need our socials to explode in accordance with the quality of our guests. Follow me on social media at George Sipos. That's Twitter, Instagram, and motherflipping TikTok. Tom?
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can not follow me down to the latest Taylor Swift concert because I can't get tickets because she's that popular.
She's incredibly popular. Suzanne, tell the lovely people where they can follow you and support you and see your high level of quality TikTok output.
Pressure. You can follow me at Susie Stevens on TikTok.
And thank you so much for joining us, Suzanne. You've vastly improved the both the quality and the tenor of the show. So I think I might get rid of one of these guys and we'll have you in instead.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, back up. What if Tom, Suze, what if we got rid of George?
Yeah.
Well, I got all the passwords, so good luck, motherfucker. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.